Ethan Corrin stepped into the grand chamber of the Galactic Tribunal, his boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. The courtroom was enormous, far larger than anything on Earth or any human colony. Towering walls stretched up into darkness, dotted with floating holographic displays and hovering alien scribes taking notes in languages humans could barely recognize. The air was thick with tension, charged by the presence of hundreds of alien delegates. Their eyes, shimmering in colors he had no names for, watched him like predators studying prey. At the center, on a raised dais of carved obsidian, sat the presiding judge, Xylarth of Rexus. He was larger than any human, with armored exoskeleton plates that gleamed like polished metal. His mandibles clicked softly as he spoke, each sound a sharp reminder that this was not a court built for humans. Ethan felt the weight of the room pressing down, but he did not flinch. He had trained for this moment for years, memorizing alien law, studying their history, and anticipating every argument they could throw at him. He knew failure here could cost millions of human lives across distant colonies. "You dare stand here?" Xylarth's voice was a hiss that seemed to rattle the chamber itself. "Filthy human. Your kind has no right to speak in matters of interstellar law." The room erupted in derisive sounds. Alien delegates clicked their mandibles, hissed, and muttered in low tones, mocking him. Ethan's stomach tightened, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. Fear was natural, but he could not let it show. He thought of the human settlements that relied on him, the engineers on orbital stations, the families on distant mining colonies, the children who would grow up seeing humans as weak if he failed. He could not fail. Ethan raised his hands slowly. "I am not here to beg," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I am here to prove that humans can act with logic, courage, and honor. That we can solve problems others ignore. That we can save lives the galaxy refuses to protect." A ripple of whispers ran through the delegates. Some of them tilted their heads, intrigued despite themselves. Humans rarely spoke like this, and never with confidence in front of the tribunal. Xylarth leaned forward, his compound eyes narrowing. "Bold words, human. But words are meaningless. Show us why your species deserves attention. Show us why we should care for the weak and insignificant humans on distant colonies." Ethan felt the weight of the challenge. It was more than a legal argument, it was a battle of wit, courage, and timing. Every alien in the room assumed he was weak, that his species was inferior. That was their mistake. Humanity had survived plagues, wars, betrayals, and near-extinction events. Humans acted when others froze. Humans risked themselves for the greater good. That was his advantage. He activated a small device on his wrist, projecting a holographic map of Zithra Prime above the dais. The planet, once thriving, now floated scarred and damaged in the projection. Ethan traced the lines of collapsing orbital cores, failing energy grids, and abandoned colonies. "The humans living on these worlds sent repeated warnings," he said. "Warnings ignored by your engineers. Warnings dismissed because of arrogance and belief in your infallibility. Today millions are at risk because of your failure to act." Murmurs spread through the delegates. Some clicked their tongues. Others hissed softly, showing frustration. One of the younger judges, smaller and less imposing than Xylarth, leaned forward, his eyes flicking between the holographic display and Ethan. There was curiosity there, faint but undeniable. Xylarth slammed a clawed appendage against his desk. "Enough. We judge based on facts, not fear-mongering. You humans are emotional creatures. What proof do you have that your warnings are correct?" Ethan felt a spark of opportunity. He had prepared for this. He activated another sequence on his wrist device, pulling up orbital drone footage from Zithra Prime. Streams of images showed failing core systems, sparks arcing across energy conduits, and planetary structures trembling under stress. "Here is proof," he said. "This is happening now. If no action is taken, millions will die. Human lives, alien lives, lives of every species connected to these colonies. All preventable." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. Even the jeering delegates paused. Ethan could feel it, the first crack in centuries of alien arrogance. Yet Xylarth's gaze remained unbroken. His eyes glimmered with something dangerous, the challenge of proving Ethan wrong. "You presume to lecture me?" Xylarth hissed. "To tell the tribunal that it has been blind and careless?" Ethan's voice did not waver. "I presume nothing. I present facts. You judge based on evidence, not on pride or fear. I am here to prevent a catastrophe. Every second you delay makes it worse. Humanity acts. We act when others hesitate." The room hummed with tension. Ethan's words had shifted the trial from insult to life or death stakes. The audience understood that this was no longer a game of words. The tribunal's decisions could now change the fate of billions. Every alien in the chamber, even Xylarth, had to consider the possibility that this small, seemingly fragile human could be right. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had to maintain focus. One wrong move, one misstep, and the tribunal could dismiss him and doom countless lives. But if he succeeded, he could prove not only humanity's worth but its necessity in the galaxy. A low murmur rippled through the chamber as Xylarth leaned back slightly, his gaze flicking between the holograms and the human standing before him. "Very well," he said, his tone cold but measured. "Show us, human. Prove that your species is capable of what you claim. Convince the tribunal, or face judgment." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. This was just the beginning. The evidence was clear, the stakes higher than ever, and failure was not an option. Somewhere in the tribunal, he could sense the alien whisperings, the disbelief mixing with cautious curiosity. He knew what he had to do next. He had to turn knowledge into action, fear into respect, and skepticism into belief. The next move would decide everything. And in the back of his mind, one thought lingered, sharp as a blade. If I fail now, countless lives will be lost, and humanity itself may be forgotten. The chamber held its breath. The trial had begun. Ethan Corrin's eyes stayed fixed on the holographic display above the tribunal dais. The spinning image of Zithra Prime's core trembled as sparks of energy flashed across the failing grids. He could feel the alien delegates shifting in their seats, their long limbs clicking against the floor, their compound eyes narrowing. He knew some of them doubted him. Some were just waiting for him to slip, to confirm their belief that humans were too small, too emotional, too fragile to matter in the grand design of the galaxy. But Ethan had no room for fear. The fate of billions rested on his voice, his timing, and his mind. Every second lost could cost lives. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, memorized every failure of the alien engineers, every miscalculation that had led to Zithra Prime's decay, and every human colony left vulnerable. He cleared his throat. "I will be direct," he said. "Zithra Prime's orbital core is failing. The energy feedback loop has destabilized. If ignored, the core will rupture within hours, sending debris and shockwaves into surrounding human colonies, mining stations, and civilian transports. Thousands of lives, perhaps millions, are at risk." A murmur rose from the audience. Aliens clicked and hissed. One tall delegate, his scales a deep violet, leaned forward. "And you expect us to believe that your fragile species can solve what our engineers could not?" Ethan swallowed. He had expected this reaction. "I do not expect you to believe. I expect you to observe. I expect you to act based on evidence." He tapped his wrist device. Holographic lines traced the failing energy conduits in detail, highlighting weak points and imminent failures. "Your engineers ignored repeated warnings. Human specialists identified the fault weeks ago, but your bureaucratic hesitation and arrogance delayed action. Today, inaction will be deadly. Humans can act where you hesitated." Xylarth slammed a clawed hand against his podium. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. "Your species brags of courage," he hissed. "But this is proof only of your arrogance. You assume competence without authority, and expect us to follow blindly." Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. He could feel sweat prickling at the back of his neck, but he did not falter. "I do not ask for blind obedience," he said. "I offer facts, evidence, action. Let humans deploy emergency stabilization drones to the orbital core. Let us act while you deliberate. The choice is simple: we prevent disaster or millions die." A low, vibrating hiss ran through the room. Some of the younger judges whispered among themselves. One of them, a smaller alien with a translucent head showing pulsing neural filaments, leaned forward. "He is correct," it said in a voice that seemed hesitant, almost uncertain. "The readings align with the logs we received. Inaction may indeed cause the failure predicted." Xylarth's mandibles clicked sharply. "You presume to lecture the tribunal? You presume to correct centuries of experience with your human intuition?" Ethan's hands remained steady. "It is not intuition. It is calculation, observation, human ingenuity. I do not claim superiority. I claim urgency. Humanity can act when others hesitate. We act to save lives. That is our nature. That is why I am here." The alien murmurs grew louder, some questioning, others incredulous. The tribunal was shifting, slowly but undeniably. Ethan sensed the first real crack in their armor of arrogance. They had assumed he would crumble under their derision. They had assumed he would panic, stumble, or plead for mercy. Instead, he stood unshakable, armed with logic, proof, and courage. He activated another projection. This one showed live feeds from orbital drones near Zithra Prime. Sparks leaped from failing conduits. Structures shook violently. The core's magnetic fields pulsed dangerously. "This is happening now," Ethan said, voice rising but steady. "If we do nothing, it will be catastrophic. If humans lead the mitigation, we can stabilize the system and prevent disaster. Lives depend on immediate action." A few delegates hissed in shock. Some leaned back, visibly disturbed. One high-ranking judge tapped a claw against his desk repeatedly, signaling disbelief. Yet some flicked their eyes toward Ethan, curiosity overcoming skepticism. They had to admit, the human was uncommonly precise, uncommonly calm, uncommonly courageous. Xylartha's eyes flared. "And what guarantee do we have that your intervention will succeed? That your species' fragile hands will not make matters worse?" Ethan's throat was dry, but his mind raced. He had anticipated this. "There are no guarantees," he admitted. "But if we act, we have a measurable chance. If we delay, failure is certain. The data supports action. My team is ready. Human engineers aboard orbiting stations have preloaded the stabilization protocols. We can deploy immediately, but only if you allow it." A tense silence filled the chamber. Aliens shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Xylartha's mandibles clicked slowly. "And you would risk your own life to ensure success?" Ethan's chest tightened. He thought of the humans on the stations, the families on distant worlds, the children who depended on him. "Yes," he said simply. "I will risk everything because that is what humans do. We act when others freeze. We protect life even when it is impossible. Even when the odds are against us." The room seemed to hold its breath. The tribunal had expected a human to cower, to beg, to make excuses. Instead, they were confronted with resolve, with courage, with intelligence that refused to be ignored. Xylartha's claws twitched as he considered the situation. "Very well," he said finally, his tone sharp but edged with something like cautious respect. "Humans may attempt intervention. But know this, failure will not be forgiven. You will be judged not for your courage but for your results." Ethan nodded. "Understood." His mind raced. This was more than a court trial. This was a chance to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy, to save countless lives, and to challenge centuries of prejudice in one decisive act. As the tribunal chambers began to prepare the authorization for human intervention, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The drones were ready. The core was unstable. One mistake, one miscalculation could mean death. And yet, a flicker of hope sparked in his chest. Humans had survived impossible odds before. They could do it again. The question hung in the air. Would the galaxy allow them to succeed, or would centuries of alien arrogance crush the first opportunity to prove humanity's courage? Ethan's eyes met the flickering holographic display. He took a deep breath. The next move would decide everything. Ethan Corrin's fingers hovered over the console as the authorization from the tribunal blinked green. The human engineers in orbit were ready. Every second counted. He could feel the pressure building not just from the failing orbital core of Zithra Prime, but from the eyes of the Galactic Tribunal, all of them expecting him to fail. Xylarth sat on the dais, his mandibles clicking softly, watching, waiting as if daring the human to make a mistake. "You claim humans can stabilize this system," Xylarth hissed, leaning forward, his piercing eyes narrowing. "And yet your species has never mastered anything on a scale that matters. How can you presume competence?" Ethan met the alien's gaze calmly. "Because humans think differently. We find solutions when others are paralyzed by hierarchy, arrogance, or fear. We act when action is the only path to survival." The tribunal murmured. Some delegates hissed and clicked their mandibles. Others tilted their heads, curious. A few younger judges whispered among themselves, debating the possibility that this human might actually succeed. Ethan sensed the subtle shift. He had them questioning assumptions. That was the first victory. He activated his wrist device. A live feed projected across the chamber. Orbital drones hovering above Zithra Prime, sparks flying from failing energy conduits, a glowing red warning along the planet's core grid. "This is not speculation," Ethan said. "This is happening now. Every second you hesitate increases the risk. Human teams are ready to deploy stabilization protocols. If we act immediately, we can prevent catastrophe." A tall alien delegate, scales a dark green, clicked his tongue in disbelief. "And what guarantee do you provide? How do we know your interference will not worsen the situation?" Ethan pressed a button, bringing up schematics of the orbital core. Your engineers miscalculated the energy feedback loop. It is unstable, failing due to incorrect damping coefficients and ignored warning signals. Human engineers have already recalculated the system, prepared drone-based stabilization, and optimized energy flows to prevent runaway core failures. If deployed now, it will work. The tribunal was silent, except for the faint hum of hovering hollow projectors. Even Xylartha's eyes flickered with doubt. He had expected bluster, a human stumbling, pleading, or panicking. Instead, he was confronted with precise data, a calm demeanor, and a plan backed by both logic and immediate action. Ethan leaned forward slightly. You may call it arrogance. I call it necessity. Humanity has survived impossible odds because we do not wait for permission when lives are at stake. We act. We innovate. We risk ourselves for others. That is what makes humans essential to the galaxy. Xylartha's claws tapped the desk in irritation. Words are meaningless. Proof. Evidence. Ethan smiled faintly. You will have it. He brought up another projection. The drone footage zoomed into the failing sections of Zithra Prime's orbital core. Sparks arced, metal twisted, and alarms pulsed. A cluster of human engineers floated in zero gravity, preparing the stabilization drones. Their calm efficiency contrasted sharply with the chaos of the failing system. See this? Ethan said, pointing to the feed. Human engineers already on site are executing the stabilization plan. Your scientists could not act because of fear, hesitation, and bureaucracy. Humans act under impossible pressure. That is the difference. One of the younger judges, translucent-skinned with flickering neural patterns, leaned closer. The calculations, they are correct. If humans deploy now, the failure can be prevented. The room shifted. Alien whispers turned to debates. Some delegates hissed in frustration at being challenged. Others looked intrigued. Ethan's heart pounded. He had turned skepticism into curiosity. Now, it was up to him to convert curiosity into action. Xylartha's gaze bore into him. And what of the risk to your own species? Will you ensure success at the cost of your own life? Ethan's chest tightened. He thought of the families on mining colonies, the engineers in orbit, the children who had no say in this but whose lives hung in the balance. Yes, he said firmly. I will risk everything because that is what humans do. We do not run from danger when others cannot act. We protect life even when the odds are impossible. That is who we are. The tribunal was silent again. Even the skeptics could not ignore the determination in his voice, the clarity in his evidence, or the bravery in his presence. They had expected weakness, they found resolve. They had expected panic, they found precision. Ethan keyed the command. The orbital drones activated, their thrusters igniting, propelling them toward the failing core with perfect timing. Streams of blue stabilization energy arced between the drones and the failing conduits. Sparks flared, red alarms pulsed, and for a moment, the chamber collectively held its breath. The first correction wave hit. Energy surges calmed. Conduits stabilized. Alarms flickered and then stopped. Ethan's pulse raced, but he remained focused. Human teams are adjusting energy flows in real time, he said, voice firm. The system is stabilizing. Zithra Prime's core is responding. If we continue, disaster will be prevented. A ripple of astonishment moved through the tribunal. Alien delegates whispered to one another, some in disbelief, others in awe. Xylartha's mandibles clicked slowly. For the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of something like respect, or perhaps fear. He could not relax. One wrong move, one miscalculation by the drones or human engineers, and the entire stabilization could fail. But he felt a quiet confidence. Humans had survived impossible odds before. And now, in front of the galaxy's most skeptical eyes, they were proving they could again. The tribunal chamber held its breath. Outside, Zithra Prime's core began to glow steadily, the storm of energy stabilizing. The impossible was happening. Humans were making a difference where aliens had failed. And somewhere on the dais, Xylartha's eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed the first hint that centuries of prejudice might be challenged. The question remained, would the tribunal allow the humans to finish, or would their pride and arrogance try to stop them before the work was complete? Ethan's mind raced. One more wave of correction energy, one final calculation, and the outcome would be clear. Failure was still possible. But for the first time he felt the faint spark of hope, and the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. The galaxy was watching. And humans were proving they could rise to the occasion. Ethan Corrin's hands moved over the holographic controls with steady precision, his mind racing faster than any alien tribunal could comprehend. The orbital drones swarmed around Zithra Prime's failing core like a swarm of glowing fireflies, each carrying stabilization pulses that hummed through the planet's crumbling energy grids. Sparks still flew from stressed conduits, warning lights blinked furiously, and tremors shook the structure of the core. One miscalculation, one delayed command, and the planet would erupt, scattering debris across multiple human and alien colonies. Xylarth leaned forward on the dais, his mandibles clicking with impatience. "This human believes he can control forces beyond his comprehension," the alien hissed. "Foolish arrogance. He will fail and we will see the result of human weakness." Ethan ignored the words. His mind was focused entirely on the mission. He had predicted every failure mode the aliens had overlooked. The engineers in orbit had trained for this exact scenario. Every human protocol, every calculation, every contingency plan had been preloaded into the drone systems. He only needed to guide them through the final stabilization wave. "Energy surge in Quadrant 3, one human engineer called over the comm link. "We're losing conduit stability, redirecting drone Alpha now." Ethan's fingers danced over the controls. "Alpha, override lateral damping. Beta and Gamma, synchronize feedback loops. Delta, stabilize flux in the northern quadrant. Keep the wave steady. Monitor pressure differentials. Now." The drones obeyed with mechanical precision. Streams of blue energy shot from their thrusters, striking failing conduits, arcing across the trembling planetary core. Sparks flared brighter than before, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed as if the stabilization had failed entirely. The holographic display shook. The tribunal murmured, alien voices filled with panic and disbelief. Even Xylarth's eyes widened, the mandibles clicking rapidly in alarm. Ethan clenched his jaw. "Stay focused. Quad 3 is critical. Apply the secondary damping array, now." One by one the drones shifted, their thrusters adjusting in microseconds. Energy surges calmed. Conduits stopped sparking. The planet's trembling slowed. Ethan felt the pulse of the stabilization flowing under his fingertips. The impossible was starting to happen. Zithra Prime's core was responding to human intervention. A delegate hissed sharply. "This cannot be. Humans can act with precision? This is beyond our calculations." Ethan did not answer. There was no time for words. The core's magnetic field still flickered, unstable but salvageable. He keyed another command sequence. "Deploy the tertiary flux regulators. Extend energy harmonics across all failing sectors. Monitor feedback loops manually." The drones responded, stretching their energy streams further, balancing the unstable magnetic currents. Sparks shrank, tremors eased, and the red warnings on the holographic display began fading to green. For the first time, the chamber could see that the planet itself was stabilizing. Xylarth's mandibles clicked, slower now with something unrecognizable, uncertainty. "Impossible," he whispered. "A human can do what centuries of Rexus engineers could not?" Ethan's pulse raced, but he remained calm. "We are not extraordinary because we think ourselves superior," he said quietly into his comm link. "We are extraordinary because we act when others hesitate. Lives depend on action, not pride." The younger alien judges whispered urgently among themselves. One leaned forward, his neural filaments pulsing with excitement. "The human is correct. They are saving the planet." Ethan felt a surge of determination. One final adjustment, one last push, and Zithra Prime would be stable. He keyed in the final override, a risky maneuver to redistribute the failing energy across the orbital stabilization grid. The holographic display flared, the chamber holding its collective breath. The tremors slowed. Sparks ceased. Lights turned solid green. Zithra Prime's core was fully stabilized. Silence fell across the chamber. The alien delegates stared in disbelief. The impossible had been achieved. Xylarth leaned back, mandibles clicking softly, almost reluctantly. "Silence, human," he muttered, his voice low but not hostile. "You have stabilized the planet. The tribunal has been corrected." Ethan allowed himself a brief exhale, knowing the danger was not entirely over. One misstep, one overlooked variable could undo everything. But as he watched the drones hold steady, the engineers communicate in calm, controlled voices, and the holographic core glow a steady blue, he knew humanity had proven its worth. The chamber buzzed with whispers. Alien delegates were debating, arguing, acknowledging the truth they had long resisted. Humans could act decisively, courageously, and with intellect that rivaled even the most experienced alien engineers. A small, fragile species, mocked for centuries, had just performed a feat that many had believed impossible. Ethan turned slightly to face the tribunal, meeting Xylartha's gaze directly. "This was not arrogance," he said. "This was action. This was responsibility. This was humanity doing what it does best, protecting life even when impossible." The alien delegates leaned back, some silent, some murmuring. Xylartha's mandibles clicked once, sharply, a sound that carried the weight of reluctant respect. "The humans have demonstrated value. They have courage." For the first time, Ethan felt a deep, quiet pride, not just in himself but in his species. Humans were capable of heroism, of brilliance under pressure, of moral courage when the galaxy itself seemed indifferent. Zithra Prime was stable. Lives were saved. And humanity had earned its place in the eyes of a skeptical, arrogant tribunal. Yet Ethan knew this was only the beginning. This victory would echo across the stars, but it would also make enemies. Those who resented human intervention would watch, waiting for a misstep, ready to dismiss or sabotage the species. He allowed himself a small, determined smile. Let them watch. Let them doubt. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and survived. Now, the galaxy had seen what humans could achieve when they refused to stand aside. And somewhere deep in the chamber, Xylartha's eyes, once full of contempt, held something new: respect, and the faintest trace of fear. The galaxy had changed, and humans were at the center of that change. Ethan exhaled slowly, knowing the final judgment was still ahead. But for now, the impossible had been accomplished. Humans had acted, and the galaxy would never forget it. The courtroom remained silent after Zithra Prime's core had stabilized. The hum of drones faded into the distance, their work complete, and the planet now glowed steadily in the holographic projection. Alien delegates leaned back in their seats, some still whispering, others sitting stiffly, eyes fixed on Ethan Corrin. Even Xylarth, the presiding judge, remained unusually quiet, his mandibles clicking slowly as he studied the human before him. Ethan's shoulders ached from tension, but he stood straight, his gaze unwavering. He had accomplished what no alien engineer, no centuries of technological superiority, could do. Humans had acted decisively where others hesitated, and lives had been saved. He could feel the weight of responsibility lifting slightly, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. But he knew the trial was not over. Words of judgment would still follow. Xylarth finally spoke. His voice, usually sharp and cold, carried a note of reluctant respect. "Silence, human," he said, almost as if he were testing the sound of the words. "You have stabilized Zithra Prime. The tribunal has been corrected. Your species has demonstrated something we have long underestimated." A murmur ran through the chamber. The younger alien judges exchanged glances, their compound eyes wide with astonishment. Ethan caught the flicker of acknowledgement in several delegates' faces. Humans were not fragile, weak, or insignificant. Humans were capable of courage, ingenuity, and moral action in ways even the tribunal could not ignore. Ethan took a deep breath. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "But this is not about praise. This is about survival, about responsibility. Humanity acts because we must, because lives are at stake. That is why we cannot be dismissed or underestimated. Not now. Not ever." Some delegates whispered amongst themselves, some clicked mandibles nervously, as if debating whether to challenge him. But the room's energy had shifted. Fear and derision had given way to cautious acknowledgement, and even the most skeptical aliens could see that Ethan's words carried truth. Xylarth rose slowly, his towering form casting a long shadow over the dais. "Humans," he said, each syllable deliberate, "your courage and competence have forced the tribunal to recognize your value. We will implement your oversight protocols on Zithra Prime and its colonies. You have proven that humanity can act decisively when others cannot. That is your contribution, and it is undeniable." A ripple of astonishment spread through the chamber. Some delegates hissed softly, unwilling to accept it, while others clicked mandibles in reluctant agreement. The young translucent judge nodded, pulsing neural filaments signaling approval. Even those who had mocked him could no longer deny what they had witnessed. Ethan felt a wave of relief, but he did not relax completely. There was still work to do, lives to protect, systems to stabilize. This was a victory, yes, but it was also a responsibility. Humans had proven their worth, but they now had a target on their backs. Those who resented human action would be watching, waiting for mistakes. Ethan knew that the test of humanity's courage and resilience was far from over. He turned slightly to look at the humans monitoring the drones from orbital stations. They were tense, eyes fixed on their screens, following his commands with precision. Some were exhausted, some trembling from the adrenaline, but all were alive. They had survived the impossible. They had succeeded. Humanity had succeeded. Ethan's gaze returned to the tribunal. Xylartha's mandibles clicked once more, slowly, and the presiding judge leaned back. "Your species may yet be indispensable," he said as if tasting the words. "Take note, tribunal. The humans are not what we assumed. They endure. They act. And they survive." The weight of the statement hung in the air. Ethan felt a quiet pride, not for himself but for humanity. For the countless generations who had survived wars, plagues, and neglect. For the engineers, scientists, and families who had endured hardship on distant colonies. For every human who had ever refused to give in when the odds were impossible. As he stepped away from the dais, a young alien delegate approached cautiously. "Human, you have saved many lives. Your species has potential beyond what we expected." Ethan nodded briefly. "Thank you," he said. "Potential is nothing without action. Humanity acts because it must." Outside the chamber, news of the trial spread quickly through interstellar channels. Humans across distant colonies watched the feeds, hearts pounding, eyes wide. Some cried. Some cheered. Ethan had not just saved lives, he had reshaped how the galaxy viewed humanity. Humans were no longer dismissed as fragile or insignificant. They were recognized as beings capable of brilliance, courage, and moral resolve when it mattered most. Ethan allowed himself a rare smile. Zithra Prime was stable, the tribunal had acknowledged humanity, and countless lives were safe. The impossible had been achieved. He thought of the engineers in orbit, of the colonies now breathing easier, and of the children who would grow up knowing humans could rise above impossible odds. Even Xylarth, standing silently on the dais, seemed to recognize the truth. The mandibles that once clicked with contempt now moved with something resembling respect. Humanity had done what the galaxy believed was impossible. Humans had acted. Humans had survived. Humans had triumphed. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and determination. The battle had been won, but the work of proving humanity's value across the stars was just beginning. Still, one truth had been cemented in the galaxy's memory. When humans are tested, when lives hang in the balance, they rise. They act. They endure. And they will not be ignored. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy understood that humans were not merely another species. They were a force capable of courage, brilliance, and heroism beyond measure. And that understanding would echo across the stars for generations to come. Ethan looked toward the viewport at Zithra Prime, its core glowing steadily, a beacon of life restored. He whispered quietly, more to himself than anyone else, "We did it. Humanity did it." And somewhere in the shadowed corner of the tribunal, Xylartha's mandibles clicked one final time, a silent acknowledgement that humanity had earned its place, and that the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The trial was over. Humanity had prevailed.